fourth grade. If you are checking in, that means that you have read up to page 166 of chapter 12. So far in this chapter, Cimarine has made it to Roxham to talk to him. She's found out that the king was poisoned, and she was a little bit too late. She goes back and makes sure Kazul knows that the king was poisoned, and they find out that the trials for the new king will be happening fairly quickly. Part of the protocol is going and bringing a certain gift, so Kazul is hurrying to try and make sure everything's together. Cimarine's trying to help her to prepare and do everything for it. So we left off with Cimarine having finished all the running around, making sure all the arrangements are together and ready, and everything being put together for the trials. So I'm picking up on the bottom of page 166, and I'm going to read to the end of the chapter. Cimarine was up early the next morning, stirring a dozen ostrich eggs in a large iron kettle for Kazul's breakfast. Kazul ate all of them, then slid out of the cave and prepared to leave for the Ford of Whispering Snakes. "Don't fret, Princess," Kazul said. "The testing doesn't start until 10. I have plenty of time to get there, even if I stop to rest now and then." Her voice sounded much better than it had the day before, and it no longer seemed to rasp in her throat. "While I'm gone, why don't you visit Warog's princess? See if she's noticed anything odd these past few days. We need to know as much as we can before we talk to the new king about Warog and the wizards." "All right," Cimarine said, "as soon as I'm done with the dishes." Kazul turned and leaped into the air, her wings churning clouds of dust from the dry surface of the ground. Cimarine squinted after her and shouted, "Good luck!" Kazul's wings dipped in answer before the dragon soared out of sight behind the shoulder of the next mountain. Cimarine stood looking after Kazul, her forehead wrinkling in worry. After a moment, she shook herself and went inside. She had work to do. Washing the dishes did not take long, and as soon as she was done, Cimarine set off to visit Alienora. The tunnels and passageways were silent and empty, and Cimarine's footsteps echoed eerily through the darkness. She began to wish she had taken the longer route along the outside of the mountain. She had not realized that the Dragon City would seem so strange and lifeless with all the dragons gone. "Psst! Cimarine!" Cimarine jumped. She whirled in the direction of the voice, raising her lamp like a club, and Alienora stepped out of the adjoining tunnel and into the circle of light. In one hand, she clutched a large bucket, 3/4 full of soapy water, and she looked rather pale. "Alienora," Cimarine said, lowering her arm, "what are you doing out here?" "Shh," Alienora said. She looked nervously over her shoulder. "Warog told me to scrub off the table in the banquet room while everyone was away, and I heard someone moving around in there, even though everyone but us is gone, and I dropped my lamp, and—" "Oh my goodness," Cimarine said. "The Stone Prince! I'd forgotten all about him." "Who?" "The Stone Prince." Quickly, Cimarine explained how she had found and hidden him the day before. "And I hadn't thought about it until now, but this is the perfect time to get him out of the mountains," she finished. "All the dragons are gone, and no one will see him. Come on, before I forget again." Alienora nodded dubiously, and the two girls headed for the banquet room. When they arrived, Cimarine went in first, holding her lamp high. "Prince," she called, "are you there? It's me, Cimarine." "Yes, I'm here," said the Stone Prince, unfolding stiffly from a gray lump in the corner. "I'm glad you're back. Who's this you've brought with you?" "Princess Alienora of the Duchy of Toron Marsh," Cimarine said. "She's the princess of the dragon Warog just now." Does her father need a great service done for him?" the prince asked hopefully. "Not that I know of," Cimarine replied, "unless you're good at getting rid of aunts, but that would be more of a service to Alienora than to her father." "I can think of nothing that would make me happier," the prince said, with evident admiration as he bowed stiffly to Alienora. "Good afternoon, princess. Or should it be good evening? It's hard to tell without windows." Alienora blushed and looked down at her bucket without answering. Actually, it's good morning, Cimarine told the prince. I'm sorry it took me so long to come back for you, but, well, a lot has been going on. Alienor looked up sharply. You've been sitting in here in the dark all night? She shuddered. You could have at least left him a candle, Cimarine. Thank you for the thought, Princess Alienora, but it's just as well she didn't, the Stone Prince said. If I'd been sitting here with a lit candle, they'd have noticed me right away. And an unlit candle isn't much use in the dark, is it? What do you mean? Cimarine said. Who would have noticed you? The dragon, and the two men he was talking to, replied the prince. I think they were wizards. What? Said Cimarine and Alienora together. Well, they talked as if they were wizards, the prince said. They weren't carrying staffs, though. What did they look like? Cimarine said. They were both tall, and they both had beards. The older one's was gray, and the younger one's was brown. Antarel and Zeminar, Cimarine said. And they were talking to a dragon? The Stone Prince nodded. Then they wouldn't have been carrying staffs. Dragons are allergic to them. Did you hear what they said? Something about a contest, the Stone Prince said. The wizards were going to fix it so this dragon would win. It sounded like a kind of cross-country race, and the wizards were going to hide along the path and help the dragon out somehow. I'm afraid I'm not very clear about that part. Spells aren't my specialty. I'm much better at hopeless causes. Alienor and Cimarine exchanged appalled glances. The trials with Colin Stone to pick the new king, Alienor said. Which dragon? Cimarine asked urgently. Do you know which dragon they were talking to? I only heard the name once, the prince said. He sounded apologetic and a little embarrassed. And I don't think I got it right. It's too silly. Tell us, Cimarine commanded. Well, it sounded like warthog, the prince said in an even more apologetic tone than before. Could it have been warog? Cimarine asked. That's it, the prince said. I knew it couldn't really have been warthog. What a pity you remembered, said a voice from the entrance into the banquet hall. Cimarine whirled. Antarel stood in the doorway, staff in hand, watching them with an intolerably smug expression. Okay, so at this point, all of the dragons have left. They're not in the caves, they're not in the Mountains of Mourning, because they've gone to the Ford of Whispering Snakes to compete in the trials. Flipping back a little bit earlier in the chapter, we go to where Cimarine kind of touches back on how the test works. This is something that they talked about earlier in the book when Cimarine is doing some research and reading back through some of those older texts to study dragons and dragon culture. So you have to carry, there's a specific rock. The one who is meant to be king will be able to carry it the entire way. Anyone who can't, it'll like vibrate so violently that they'll have to drop it. And it's just part of the lore that the chosen dragon will kind of magically be able to carry something that should be impossible to carry. Even though it's not very heavy, it's just the magic and vibrating power. We also remember from earlier on in the book that to become king of the dragons is not a gendered role. A king is just a position. So Kazul, as a female dragon, could be a king of the dragons, and the previous king, Tokaz, who was male, was a king. It is not like a king and queen situation based on gender, just king, the higher position. So, Kazul is prepared to go. She has left. She's gone, and when Cimarine goes to talk to Alienora to find out about like something that might be happening with Warog, she runs into Alienora and finds out there definitely was something happening with Warog, because when they talk to the Stone Prince, he reveals that he heard the two wizards talking with Warog, and for them to come and be in the caves in the Mountain of Mourning is not only kind of not allowed, but also highly suspicious. And it seems that our next chapter is going to be very interesting because Antarel has just come upon them. So, with the chapter you've just read, so kind of thinking about Cimmerine, getting to Roxham, explaining the situation, finding out what's happening, getting to Gazul, and having to prepare quickly to get her to the trials, and now kind of realizing there's something that she might have to do at home, you are going to make a creative response. So you have 3 options. I'm going to read about each one of them, and I might give you some examples so you have a few ideas. So first, choose a scene from the chapter to make a still life of using toys and other items from home. Now, I don't know exactly what materials you have. You can take whatever you want. If you've got maybe something to create, like it's part of the cave. Maybe you want to show the stone prints in the cave. So you use rocks and pile them up to make the stone prints, and you use a little bit of like a little pillow as a table, and you have a little action figure and a doll that are Cimmerine and Alienora. This is your creative choice on what to do. Now that just them coming into there could be an interesting scene. Maybe you'd want to have the moment that Antarel arrives and interrupts them. But you're setting up the whole scene, take a picture of it, and then write about what scene it is, so what's happening, and why you chose that scene. So if you did pick that, why did you want to make that scene, make that visual for it? Maybe you want to go earlier in the chapter. Maybe you have a creative idea of how you want to put things together to look like a dragon, and you'll have Roxham and a Cimmerine talking, or something with Cimmerine and Gazul. But go back through the chapter, figure out what scene, and you can make that visual. Do you have to do this one? No, because there's 2 other options. So that was the first one. Make that scene. It's like a still life, so just sitting there. You're not doing a full like video or anything fancy. Take a picture of the scene and then write about it and why you chose it. So make sure it's detailed so I understand like what's going on. If you're just like, here it is, it's Cimmerine and a dragon, you're like, I would be very confused about what part of the story you were trying to show. So that's A. B. Create a comic strip depicting the main events of the chapter. So we just read through the end of it, and I just sort of reviewed and summed up the whole chapter. You would need to make at least 10 panels. Panels are little squares in a comic strip. That means that you can kind of break up bits of the story. So if there aren't 10 main events, there are at least 10 transitional moments. So for example, with the end there, I wouldn't want to take all 10 panels to be Cimmerine runs into Alienora in the hallway, Cimmerine and Alienora go into the cave, Cimmerine and Alienora meet the prince, Cimmerine and Alienora ask him, like, don't stretch it out too much, but you can spread out the main things. If you want to break it up into Gazul and Roxham, Cimmerine and Roxham, Cimmerine and Gazul, and then Cimmerine, Alienora, and the Stone Prince, you can have a couple panels of each of those sections of the chapter, and then show, just over the course of it, what's going on. It can be more than 10 panels, but it can't be less. If you give me a 3-panel comic that's just, Roxham, look out, the wizards have Dragon's Bane. I must go to the trials. You're made of stone? And that's like your whole thing. You would know generally what's going on, and I would kind of pick up on it, but no one else reading that would understand the story. A comic strip version of something should be easy for another person to look at and go, oh, okay, I can see what's going on. With any comic strip, you have the option to make little narrations at the bottom. I want you to focus on the main point, so don't include every single word or detail. If you try to recreate the entire chapter and all of the information, it will be 1, tedious for you, but 2, way too long. I don't want an entire comic book. So, strip can be 10 panels or a little bit more. Focus on the main things, don't go word for word, and if you need to have little descriptions at the bottom like some comic books do, you can do that, but make sure you're including some of the action and the things that people might say to each other. Last one, so that was second option. Third option. Make a 2-paragraph written response to this prompt. If Cimmerine had gotten to Roxham sooner to warn him about the Dragon's Bane, do you think the king would have been really safe? Summarize the wizard's master plan. How do you think Cimmerine will avoid the wizards and warn the dragons in time? So you'd be kind of breaking things up, writing out 2 things to that response. I wanted to make sure you guys had a written option in case you felt that, you just weren't feeling super creative, didn't want to be drawing, didn't have stuff at home, or didn't want to put together the stuff at home to make a scene. You have this other option that everyone could do, which is the written option. And I'm asking you your opinion, and then I'm asking you to summarize a little bit of the plan. So from what we've been told, we kind of know what's going on there. And how do you think Cimarine will handle it? What do you think is going to be coming up? Once again, this is not going to be graded on accuracy. Don't go flipping ahead and be like, oh, I think she'll do this. And it's just the exact thing from the story. I want you to stay in this chapter. Just give me your predictions. You're getting credit for thinking about it and making a prediction, not on getting it right. So, 3 options. A still life scene where you're describing what's happening in the scene and why you picked it. A comic strip where you are kind of summarizing this chapter and showing the main events of it happening drawn out. Or responding to the written response prompt. You're not just writing anything, you're going to answer those questions. It needs to be 2 paragraphs, so easy, just chunk it out, right? If she'd gotten there sooner, do you think that the king actually would have been safe, or do you think something else would have happened? And then, what's their master plan, and how do you think Cimarine's going to handle it? So, those are your options. I hope you guys like this chapter. This is where the action starts to really, really pick up in the story. Obviously, you know now that there's a big conspiracy going on in the Mountains of Mourning, and we are going to see how things get handled. There are a lot of extra players that have been added in. Now we've got the Stone Prince seemingly as part of their group, and I'm excited for you guys to see what happens when we continue on with next week. I'm also very excited to see your creative responses, whether it's a still life, a comic strip, or your written predictions and thoughts. I am eager to see what you guys come up with. Email me if you have any questions, and I will help you out any way I can. Bye, 4th grade!